"Let go of me, Trixie!" screamed Twilight through tears. "I have to help him!" Trixie had tackled the flailing alicorn and was now struggling to keep her in her place. "No! You can't go down there!" She began to use her magic, trying desperately to keep Twilight in place. "Think about what's at stake. If you blow our cover now, then you'll destroy whatever chance we have to save Luna. I can't let Spike die. Not for me. If you go down there, everyone is going to die because of you." Trixie screamed at Twilight. "We need to stay patient. I'm certain she'll come back again." "No, she won't," screamed Twilight. "She'll never turned in the first place. She just changed her appearance to trick Celestia, and now Discord's been rendered useless after promising to protect him." Twilight used her hind legs to kick Trixie off of her, but the royal blue unicorn held fast. "Don't make me have to stop you, Twilight, because if it means preventing you from ruining the last chance we have of salvation, then I'll do it." Her voice was sad and desperate. "Use your head. If you go down there and try to save Spike, what will you gain? Are you even strong enough of a flyer to pull it off in time?" Twilight continued to struggle underneath Trixie. "Don't let his sacrifice be in vain. The best thing you can do for him now is to make sure that the mare who did this gets what she truly deserves. And the only way to do that is by winning." Twilight stopped struggling and laid her head down on the cloud. Millions of things were racing through her mind at light speed. No matter what her maternal instincts told her, she couldn't deny that Trixie was right. Every fiber in her being told her to go save Spike. But at what cost? By rescuing him, she would alert Nightmare Moon to her location, and quite possibly her plan. And who's to say she wouldn't chase them and kill them both afterwards? Trixie and Twilight were counting on Nightmare Moon to turn back into Luna. That way, they could use the Mind Smear mixture to ease Nightmare Moon as she existed as a memory. They couldn't be sure whether the person would delete Nightmare Moon herself, and even if it did, libraries of information stored inside the princess's head could be forgotten along with her. Not only that, they couldn't be certain the Nightmare Moon would allow Luna to reassume control. They were hoping that perhaps she would use it as a tactic to torture Celestia, and even that turned out to be a dead end. The moment Nightmare began to change, Twilight was skeptical. There was no reason for her to have lost control. However, against all suspicion, Twilight drove from the clouds anyway. With a bottle of Mind Smear in her magical grasp, she began rocketing down to the overlook that Luna and Celestia had done battle upon. Luckily, she became aware of Luna's ruse before she touched down, and with shaky wings, she much physically strained, she managed to regain altitude she had lost, attempting to fly back to her cloud. In her scurry, she had almost lost the potion, but managed to make it back to the lookout, undetected and unhurt. Now she sat idle, as her little dragon was falling to his death. It was a hard truth she had to face, and in her mind, she couldn't justify it. Nevertheless, she made no move to jump over the cloud. She instead hung her head over Trixie's shoulder, who silently mourned Spike's imminent passing as hot liquid began to fall silently from Twilight's eyes. Dying was an experience that Spike wished he would never have to face. He always imagined it as chaotic, loud, and incomprehensible horror that came and destroyed all life. But much to his surprise, it was calm and peaceful and eerily silent. He wasn't sure what had happened, but he looked around and saw nothing. He couldn't breathe, but he figured that didn't matter. Wherever he was, it felt like he was sliding through syrup, as if it was difficult to move his arms and legs, and turning his head proved to be a challenge. So, this is the afterlife, thought Spike, who opened his mouth to breathe out of habit, but instead inhaled some of the liquid, which caused him to gag and choke. He put his claws to his neck as he coughed out all the air in his lungs, removing the thick liquid from his throat as well. He felt his chest burning, begging for him to breathe, but Spike couldn't understand why. He was most certainly dead. He could never have survived that fall. What the hell was going on? Why did he feel the urge to inhale? Why were his lungs burning like fire, demanding breaths of cool oxygen, when they received only thick, viscous, chocolate-tasting liquid? Spike began to flail around slowly, and felt himself being propelled through the muck. He slowly became lightheaded as he burned away the little energy he had left, before his head broke the surface and he was greeted with the cool air all around him. He coughed and sputtered for oxygen, greedily sucking in as much as he could into his small lungs, his eyes squinting as he shut and splashed about the liquid he found himself swimming in. As he slowly peeked past the wall of muck that covered him from head to toe, he saw that he had landed in a large wooden swimming pool filled with a mysterious brown liquid. He stopped flailing about and began to simply kick his legs to keep himself afloat. When out of curiosity, he licked his lips, licking the brown liquid that covered his face with his long, winding tongue, when his eyes widened with surprise. "Pudding?" Spike said, confused. Celestia watched as the moon approached. It was difficult to tell, but it had certainly gotten larger since Nightmare Moon sent it falling towards the earth about 15 minutes ago. She had been fastened to the ground by metal shackles, magically set in place by Nightmare, who was peeking over the edge of the cliff. She bellowed out as she looked at Spike's dead, lifeless body laying in a large pool of blood. "Serves you right, dragon!" Celestia closed her eyes, sadness washing over her. She was there as Spike hatched from his egg, and even though he lived with Twilight from birth, she couldn't help but feel a looming wave of despair. The world was ending. Nightmare Moon had destroyed 3 cities, killed hundreds of innocent ponies, and Celestia had lost her horn. The Princess of the Sun had failed to stop her sister. Discord's arrogance had caused him to be incapacitated, and Twilight was nowhere to be found. Celestia used her right hoof to wipe a tear from her eye. She put it back against the ground before she realized what happened. Her hoof was free. She looked over. Certainly it hadn't been that way a few minutes ago, when her gaze fell upon a brown parasite, which, with mismatched wings, it was casually chewing as it smirked at Celestia. The princess knew who it was immediately, and had to stop herself from screaming out his name. "Discord!" she whispered excitedly to the parasite, who put one of his tiny legs to his lips. The parasite then flew to her other fettered fetlock, and bit off the shackle. "I never thought I'd be happy to see you," she said as she got to her feet. "Thought you could escape, did you?" yelled Nightmare Moon through a deranged smile. Nightmare filled her horn with purple, and a large, glowing hot pink wheel was ejected from her horn. It curved through the air before it touched the ground and began hurtling towards the two at a rapid speed. The parasite opened his mouth and barfed out a multicolored ball, which exploded to become the Spirit of Chaos. Some Spanish words I can't pronounce. He spouted theatrically before he grabbed the pink wheel as it blasted towards him, spun it around, and put it on his head like a sombrero. He then began to samba by himself. "What?" exclaimed the bewildered Nightmare Moon. "What are you? Why did—" She fumbled for the right words, but none came for a few confused seconds. "How did you get out of that statue?" she finally managed. Discord rolled his eyes mid-dance. "Please, Nightmare Moon, you don't think I'd be so stupid as to fall for a trick a third time?" He then grabbed the statue of himself and began to dance with it. Nightmare Moon forced a devious grin on her face. "I still killed your cocky partner." "Who? Spike?" Discord threw his hands in the air as he did a quick foxtrot towards Nightmare Moon. "He's anything but dead. In fact, he's a living, breathing hero." Nightmare Moon was unfazed. "I watched him fall. He hit the ground like a stone and hasn't moved since. He's as dead as you will be in a few moments." Is he really? Are you sure? Yes, I saw the bod. Nightmare Moon suddenly had a stupid look on her face. She then walked slowly back over to the cliff and peeked over. Instead of Spike's lifeless, gory corpse, she saw a big wooden sign with "Guess Again" written in red paint. Discord let out a long laugh. Silly Nightmare. I can make you see whatever I want you to see. Spike is down there somewhere, probably bragging about how he slapped you like you were his playmare. He dripped the statue and continued dancing. I wouldn't be surprised if he came back up for seconds. Nightmare growled at Discord. I'll slay you where you stand. Bite me, said the dancing spirit with a smile, as he spun his statue away. Nightmare Moon stomped her hooves and screamed with rage. 2 purple pillars of energy exploded from her horn, bending and winding their way towards Discord. The spirit of chaos opened his hands and grabbed hold of the 2 beams, and with a laugh, he began to spin his body. Nightmare Moon's eyes widened with surprise as she was lifted off the ground and swung around like a small foal on the end of a jump rope. Discord bent his legs as if he were doing an Olympic hammer throw and spun Nightmare Moon through the air before throwing her back over the side of the mountain in a black, flailing blur. She tumbled gracelessly through the air before she spread her wings and zoomed back to the mountain. She landed in a gallop, charging furiously at Discord, who took a step forward and braced himself. Just as Nightmare Moon made contact with him, Discord warped out of existence, leaving a brick wall in the shape of his silhouette. Nightmare Moon crashed into the mass of stone and mortar head first, and with a yelp, she fell to the ground. Celestia opened her eyes wide. Something rather curious happened as Nightmare Moon hit her skull against the wall. There was a pulse of light that radiated through Nightmare's body, leaving spots of navy interspersed within her jet-black coat, reminiscent of Luna, muttered Celestia under her breath. Perhaps if they could land a blow hard enough on her head, then Luna could regain control. But then what? Nightmare could just hijack her body again, and they would be right back where they started. Perhaps Discord could perform a memory hex on Luna and erase Nightmare Moon from her consciousness. In fact, that was perfect. How did she neglect to recognize this before? She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Nightmare Moon as she was hurled at her with a wooden trebuchet that Discord conjured from the earth. She managed to duck just in time, catching a short glimpse of Nightmare's furious face as she soared by and disappeared over the side of the cliff. Discord! Yelled Celestia. You have to hit her head! Aim for her head! The large mismatched figure looked over at the princess. Hit her head? Like this? He conjured an egg and violently cracked it in his claw. No, Discord. Don't kill her. Just enough to turn her back. She will lose control with a hard enough hit to the head. Got it, said Discord, as the egg put itself back together in his hand. Suddenly, Nightmare Moon came tearing back over the cliffside, her horn ablaze with hundreds of multicolored projectiles, whistling through the air at Discord. I choose the red pill, said Discord, as sunglasses appeared over his eyes. He then bent his body backwards, spinning his arms as the bullet flew over him and crashed into the mountainside behind him. Nightmare Moon stopped the magical facade and began to pant. Why won't you die? She said, as she tried to continue the magical bullet storm, but her horn sparked out, and she lost her balance. Suddenly, there was a look of horror plastered on her face, as she feared the worst. She stood back up, gritting her teeth, and tried to force herself to continue firing, but only one small magical projectile was shot from her horn, and Discord caught it mid-flight with a pair of chopsticks. All out of magic, he stated seductively, as he folded his arms across his chest. Luna was gasping for breath, sweat pouring down her face and dripping off her muzzle. Her body was out of magic, and Discord had barely been touched. Tell me, Nightmare, said Discord, how do you like your eggs? He then landed the egg he had been holding at Nightmare, which exploded against her head, sending her her tumbling limply to the ground. When the smoke from the explosion cleared, a navy blue alicorn was visible, lying in an awkward position, wounds and bruises covering her body. Celestia rushed over to her fallen sister and examined her. "Discord, come quick!" Discord casually walked over. "Please, don't rush me, Princess. I've been doing all the work for the past 10 minutes. Let me work my calves." Celestia looked back at the stubborn spirit of chaos with a livid face, only to see Discord in ill-fitting sweatpants doing yoga on a purple mat. "I need you to wipe Luna's memory. Nightmare Moon is still in there, which means she can still come back out. And we can end this disaster now if we wipe Nightmare Moon from her mind completely." "Where are your manners, Princess? Say please." Celestia was beginning to get desperate. "Please, Discord. Please." She blurted out angrily as she turned to Luna, only to find the Moon Princess's eyes fluttering wearily. "Look out below!" screamed a familiar voice from above them. Celestia looked up just in time to have an inexperienced purple flyer crash into her, sending her rolling backwards. "Twilight!" exclaimed Celestia. "No time," said the alicorn frantically, as she uncorked a bottle she had been holding. "Where have you been?" said Celestia, with a hint of irritation in her voice. "What?" said Twilight, as she reeled her head around, noticing the tone in Celestia's voice. "Where have you been all this time?" "Trixie and I had a plan," exclaimed Twilight proudly, as she galloped over to Luna. "We had this potion that erases memories, and I'm not nearly advanced enough to perform a mind-wiping spell on some pony who's lived as long as Luna has, so I figured if Nightmare Moon turned back into Luna, we could use the potion to make sure she never came back." Twilight uncorked the bottle with her magic, without even looking at it. Suddenly, Celestia's face turned grave and urgent. "Twilight, stop! Get out of there, quickly!" "What? Why?" said Twilight quickly, as she poured the liquid down Luna's throat. Celestia put her hoof to her mouth, as her eyes widened with fear. "Big mistake," said a sinister voice behind Twilight. The purple alicorn turned around to see an empty bottle of potion against Nightmare's lips, who was now experiencing the vast mind expansion that Trixie's potion provided. Her eyes began to narrow with focus, and her horn began to grow, filled with newfound power. Black thunder exploded from Nightmare's horn as the ground beneath her feet cracked. Legendary power began to pulse through her body as she simply stood there and felt it flow through her. Her horn flashed a bright white as an explosion erupted from the spot Nightmare Moon stood upon, sending Celestia, Twilight, and Discord hurtling off the mountain.